Picture a driveway in 1976. A two-tone coupe gleaming in the sun. Its roof wrapped edge to edge in padded black vinyl, stitched tight like the seat of a good leather chair. To every neighbor walking past, that roof said one thing: money, taste. A man who could have ordered a convertible and chose something even better. That roof cost about $548. A factory worker glued it on in under half an hour. For the next 10, 20, even 40 years, hidden underneath that shine, it was quietly eating away at the steel roof of that car, with no way for the owner to see it happening, until the day someone finally peeled the vinyl back and found the truth. That car was not alone. Between 1970 and 1979, this exact thing happened to nearly 38 million American cars, and almost nobody who paid for it ever saw it coming. Here's the part most people never learn, though. For at least one famous American car, that roof wasn't glued on to make it look better at all. It was glued on to hide something the factory didn't want anyone to see. To understand how any of this happened, you have to go back further than the 70s, back to the 1920s, when car makers were still borrowing ideas from an era that had barely ended, the age of the horse-drawn carriage. Wealthy carriage buyers once paid coach builders for a style called the landau, a low body with a folding top hinged by a distinctive S-shaped iron bar, so a driver and passengers could ride open to the air or covered, depending on the weather. When the automobile took over, stylists didn't let that idea die. They simply borrowed the carriage look wholesale, stretching fabric or leather over sections of a fixed steel roof, and bolting on a purely decorative S-shaped landau bar that didn't fold anything at all, because there was no folding top underneath it to fold. It was theater, dressed up as engineering. The Ford Model A Sports Coupe wore this look in the late 1920s, and it was one of the most expensive coupes in the entire Ford lineup, specifically because of that fabric and iron illusion. Cadillac and Lincoln kept the idea alive through the following decades in smaller doses, before Ford put every piece of it together in 1963 on one of the most admired American cars ever built, the Thunderbird Landau. A fixed steel roof, a wide rear pillar, no rear quarter windows, wrapped completely in vinyl instead of paint, finished off with those same ornamental landau bars. It didn't fold. It didn't open. It wasn't a convertible in any way that mattered mechanically. But it looked like one. And in 1960s, America, looking like one was the entire point. For most of that decade, the vinyl roof stayed a relatively upscale flourish, something you'd find on a loaded Cadillac or a top-trim Lincoln, not on an ordinary family sedan. That changed in 1973, when Chevrolet did something that would reshape the whole American auto industry. It put a half-vinyl roof, tiny oval opera windows punched into the rear pillars, and the Landau name itself onto a regular production car built for the masses, the Monte Carlo Landau. It wasn't a one-off show car or a limited edition. Anyone could walk into a Chevrolet dealership and simply order one. And it worked, spectacularly. Within 2 years, by 1975, there was almost no brand coming out of Detroit that didn't offer at least one model with that same combination. A padded vinyl roof paired with those small oval windows standing in for real ones. Pontiac had it, Buick had it, Oldsmobile had it. Ford, Mercury, Chrysler, Plymouth, and Dodge all had it too. Installation rates on domestic luxury models in this era regularly topped 90%, meaning if you bought one of these cars new, the odds were overwhelming that you drove it off the lot with that vinyl roof already attached. Added up across the whole decade, and the numbers get almost hard to believe. Between 1970 and 1979, close to 38 million American-built cars, More than 40% of everything Detroit produced that entire decade rolled off the line wearing a padded vinyl top. And it wasn't confined to luxury cars, either. By 1972, you could even check a box for a vinyl roof on a Ford Pinto, one of the cheapest, most stripped-down economy cars sold in America. Think about what that means. A steelworker, a school teacher, a young family stretching every dollar of a car payment could check that same box and drive home with a small taste of the exact look that Cadillac and Lincoln buyers were paying far more for. For a lot of ordinary people, that roof wasn't a frivolous option. It was proof they'd made it, even a little. But here's what none of them could see happening at the very same time. To attach a vinyl roof, factory workers glued that material directly onto the bare or thinly primed sheet metal of the car's roof, then folded and sealed the edges down around the drip rails, the rear window trim, and the roof pillars. Those seams were never perfectly watertight, not even close, and it didn't take long for rain, dew, and everyday condensation to start working their way underneath. Once moisture got trapped between a metal roof and a sheet of vinyl that couldn't breathe, it had nowhere left to go. It just sat there, against unprotected steel with none of the rust-resistant coatings modern cars take for granted. And it went to work. Rust doesn't need to be seen to spread. It started from the inside of the panel, invisible under a roof that, from 10 feet away in a driveway, still looked absolutely flawless. Owners could wash and wax that vinyl every weekend for years and have no idea their roof was hollowing out beneath their own hands. And on at least one well-documented model, the deception went even further. Automotive historians who've studied Cadillac's factory records point to the 1975 and 76 Seville, where the vinyl roof wasn't an option at all, it was mandatory. That car used a shorter roof panel borrowed from a smaller GM platform, welded onto the Seville's own body, and the seam left behind by that weld was rough enough that Cadillac simply covered it with vinyl instead of finishing and painting it properly. In other words, on that particular car, buyers weren't paying roughly $500 for a styling flourish at all. They were paying to have the factory's own shortcut hidden from view, permanently. This is the part most nostalgia videos about vinyl roofs leave out entirely, and it's the part that actually matters most today. Fast forward 50 years to classic car restoration shops working right now in 2025 and 2026. When a restorer peels a vinyl roof off a genuine untouched 1970s Survivor, what they usually find underneath isn't a little surface rust. It's often perforated steel, roof panels rusted clean through in sheets, sometimes bad enough to compromise the structural strength of the entire roof, not just its appearance. And fixing it properly is nowhere close to cheap. According to current restoration industry pricing, rust repair on a classic car today can run anywhere from a few $100s for a small surface spot to well over $150,000 for a full structural body-off rebuild, with most serious rust jobs landing somewhere between $10,000 and $32,500 in labor and materials alone. Sit with that math for a second. A roof option that cost roughly $500 when the car was new can now cost 20, 40, even 60 times that number to properly undo, half a century later. That is the real price of that vinyl roof. It was never really $548. That number was just the down payment, and the balance came due decades after the original buyer had usually already sold the car, traded it in, or handed it down to a kid learning to drive. Here's the twist almost nobody expects, though. Not every one of those 38 million cars suffered the same fate. Climate did more to decide a car's future than anything written on the factory order form. A vinyl-roofed coupe that spent its whole life in a dry, sunny climate could sail through 50 years with barely a bubble under the vinyl, while its twin, built the same week on the same assembly line, but sold into a humid or salted road climate, could rot through in under 10 years. That's why, when you see a pristine 70s land yacht rolling down the road today, with its vinyl roof still perfect, you're not just looking at a well-kept car. You're looking at a survivor of a 50-year bet against moisture, geography, and time. A bet most of its siblings quietly lost. None of this means Detroit sat in a boardroom plotting to rot people's roofs for profit. That's too simple, and it isn't what the record actually shows. What really happened looks more like an entire industry chasing one of the most profitable, most requested options it had ever offered, faster than anyone stopped to ask what 40 years of trapped moisture would do to unprotected steel. And here's a part that might be the strangest twist of all. Rust complaints are not what actually killed the vinyl roof. Buyers kept ordering them well into the early 1980s, bubbling seams and all. What really ended the vinyl roof era was something else entirely. A design revolution that had nothing to do with rust at all. Aerodynamics. When Ford redesigned the Thunderbird for 1983, and again with the Taurus in 1986,